tonight I am going to interview PaulMacInnis. Paul is a father and a husband and a real estate investor turned entrepreneur.
Should I sit over here? I
Yeah.
can sit further away.
So, welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
And your first question that I'm going to ask you is what first got you into real estate investing?
Great question. Yeah, I used to be a school teacher, and I was young, and I went from, working minimum wage jobs from, being a teenager, and then all of a sudden I was making a salary, and I thought, oh, this is amazing. I have money, I can afford to, invest in these weird things called RRSPs, and, just learning to become an adult. And one of my colleagues was selling a rental property, and he said, do you want to buy it? And I didn't know anything, and I mean anything about real estate investing, had no knowledge, but I went for it and kind of just decided to do it, and learned many lessons from that first property for sure.
And when was that? What year?
Let's see. I'm 40 now, and I bought it when I was 24, so 16 years ago, I guess.
Excellent. And is there a book or a mentor that kind of helped change your mindset about growth mindset around real estate investing?
Yeah, I would say, like Greg said, I love reading. I read all the time. It almost cliche at some of the real estate things to talk about the Rich Dad books, but, reading some of the Rich Dad books, initially started to change my mindset for sure. And then when I read, I think it's Ken McElroy that wrote ABCs of Real Estate Investing, I really started to get into the idea of this being a real, wealth machine, over time, and I was younger at the time, so I kind of understood the longer term benefits of it. And another book that I loved that's a little lesser known in the Rich Dad series is, I think his name's Tom Wheelwright, and he's an accountant. He's from the States, but a lot of applicable things to sort of save on taxes. So any of you that have properties now, like little things that I never would have known. My family, for example, we went to Costa Rica 4 or 5 years ago for, just rented a condo for a month and, and had fun. But I had read that book, and I set up a few viewings of properties while I was down there, had it documented in an email, and then I was able to claim airfare, some of the condo fees, all that sort of thing on my personal tax return, which was amazing. I never would have known that without reading that book. So it's a skinny little book, but it was a good read. And I read a lot of books, but those are two that stick out to me.
Cool, great.
Yeah.
And can you walk us through, I think you kind of walked us through your first real estate deal, but maybe your one after that, your second real estate deal.
Yeah, so I owned my first one for quite a while, probably 6 or 7 years before the thought of owning another one entered into my mind. And by that time I was engaged and a little more serious in my career and had saved a bit more money. And then, someone said, hey, why don't you refinance that property, which I had never heard of. I didn't even know what that meant. But I learned what a refi was, and then I was like, oh my God, 7 years, the property had gone up. Not significantly. This property was in Windsor in the Valley. So there was a little bit of appreciation. So, between what I paid down and some of the equity and some savings that I had, I was fortunate to be able to grab a triplex after that. So the first one was a 4-unit building, and then I got a triplex and went from there.
Great.
Yeah.
So what is your real estate investing strategy?
Good question. I would say erratic. I always look at properties. I've been I think Jenna's going to ask me a question soon about what I do now. And I've been focused on growing a business. But for a period of time, I was forever at Leanne and Randy's house, structuring deals and figuring out how to acquire properties. And I went on, a little bit of a rampage for a few years and just would buy.
15 to 30 doors in 12 months.
Yeah, and just, and to be honest, I still didn't even really know what I was doing. Like, I just sort of looked to Leanne, and I was like, how can I get funding for this? And we started going from, your just typical RBC mortgage and, going to these different lenders, different institutions. And I really started to learn, the way in which, I don't want to say you work the system, but it is the system, and the way in which you can exist within it, and the way in which you can grow your portfolio, within the bounds and structure of said system. So I don't know if I have a strategy. I was super keen on what I became really passionate about for a couple of years was not putting in my own money. If you hear use other people's money and in all these books, I was like, yeah, that sounds good. I want to do that. I don't want to use my own money. I want to use somebody else's money. And there's a myriad of ways to do it, and I did it in a number of different ways. There's people in this room whose money I have used, and paid back to get into a property. But it's amazing what's available and what you can do, and if you ask the right questions and just keep sort of poking and prodding, and then when you have someone to help guide you a little bit from the financing side of things, and Leanne certainly kind of would plunk me in front of a particular lender and say, you should talk to this person, kind of thing, once I figured out how to actually get some money in my pocket, kind of thing. So yeah.
You should mention too, you actually got caught in government changes after you bought them, so our exits were sort of sidelined as well on some of them, so yeah.
Yeah. If you remember, you can tell it. 'Cause I don't even
No,
know.
it just goes to show you the amount of planning that you can do, like, it was very interesting times.
Yeah.
And what has been your biggest hurdle to date?
I think my biggest hurdle was going from about 10 or 12 units and going past that. It's hard, and nobody likes you, and from a bank point of view, I really thought that I was going to be important. I'd walk into a bank and I felt as though they should give me money because I had proved that I knew what I was doing, and I'd owned these properties and I'm successful with them. They're full, that sort of thing. But they basically, I learned very quickly in the banking world, it's, no, you have too many, you're a risk now, we don't like you. And so you had to figure that out, and I guess I really learned the power of leveraging talent in, outside of your own personal circle of competence. And, this isn't a me trying to say Leanne is awesome, but she was awesome for me in sort of getting me out of this rut full of I can't find, RBC won't give me any more money. That's where I had been, and so now I have, or for a period of time anyways, I had mortgages at TD, at Manulife, at my God, Leanne and I drove 3 hours down to Church Point, Nova Scotia, and went into a francophone bank and somehow got a mortgage down there. Yes. So anyhow, that was definitely a hurdle, but it's doable. So kind of got through it. It is doable, but it was difficult for sure.
So what was I going to say? Yeah. How did you transition from real estate investing to your Halley Mac?
Yeah, so funny story, I guess. So I was a school teacher, high school teacher, and it's not that I didn't like teaching, but I knew I didn't want to do it forever. And real estate was an out for me a little bit. It was entrepreneurial. It was exciting, and you're sort of. It felt good. It was a bit of a rush almost, I guess, when I start to look back on it. But I realized I just didn't want to teach anymore. And in, I guess it was 4 years ago now, my first rental property that I did buy, which was a 4-unit place, it burned down. There was an electrical short. Nobody was hurt, but it burned to the ground and was, condemned and knocked down, within 48 hours, kind of thing. But I'd owned it for a while. There was some money there. Insurance paid out, paid off the mortgage, and I had some money to play with. And as that old saying, or as it goes, opportunities seem to come at interesting times. And my cousin approached me, who I hadn't talked to in years. He's younger than me. And he was like, "Oh, hey man, how's it going? I was just at my dad, my uncle, his father's 60th birthday party. We went axe throwing in Ontario. It was really fun. We should open one on the East Coast." And I was like, "Haha, yeah, okay, you're crazy." I'd never heard of it. So I said, "Okay, yeah, sure, Adrian, write me a business plan." And I expected to, see him at the next family wedding or whatever. But sure enough, he sent me a plan in like a week, and I read it, and I thought it was impressive. Not that I knew a whole lot about business plans, but I was just impressed that he wrote it. So we started to get a little more serious, and I used the money from that insurance payout to open an axe throwing location in St. John's, Newfoundland, where he lives. And so he ran it. I just kind of financially backed it. He did all the work over there. It went really well, and we grew it, and then we decided to open one in Nova Scotia, and we've opened another one in Nova Scotia. We're going to open one in New Brunswick. And so I worked still as a teacher while 2 of them were open. And then I was like, we kind of had one of those moments of piss or get off the pot kind of thing of whether you're going to teach or do this. And I decided to leave teaching and just sort of live the entrepreneur life and throw axes for a living, I guess. That's the picture.
And drink beer with it.
And drink beer. Exactly. So yeah, that's so my real estate, my very first real estate purchase has quite literally altered the course of my life in terms of kind of getting me into, and I'm much happier now. It's not that that's not stressful and everything else. It's terrifying most days when you don't know if you're going to get paid, but I love it. I wouldn't trade it, and it is thanks to real estate. And I still own, I guess 25 or 26 doors still. I did sell a 4-unit. I sold a triplex and a 4-unit in the past couple of years because my wife and I built a house. So I just kind of sold off and bought a piece of land and down payment and that sort of thing. So it's kind of, we're happy with it for sure.
Great. And what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to someone getting started?
I would definitely tell people to not be afraid to ask questions to people. Like my whole philosophy with real estate and with business is to talk to people that are smarter than me. And admit that I have no idea what I'm doing sometimes, and ask for their advice, and that's kind of how I got started. Like I didn't know if I had tried to stay the course on my own and sort of let my ego get in the way. With real estate, I'd still have 3 properties and 9 units or something, which is great, but I never would have sort of broken through a little bit to to get to the levels that I am now. And it's just because I was willing to ask questions and and go to weird places to have these meetings and drive to Church Point and places like that. So I just ask a lot of questions to people, and these meetups are amazing. I've gone to a meetup here before, not with Greg and Amanda, but I've been in this room before with a meetup, and they were awesome. Like I met people there that that I still talk to, that I've worked with on real estate deals. So just kind of asking, meeting people, like I said, we sat down and struck up a conversation, and I was like, "Oh, you do this for a living? Oh, that's weird. I do," and we just exchanged our contact information. Like it's a great way to to get out there and meet people and that sort of thing. So yeah, that would be my advice is, ask questions to people for sure.
Yeah. And speaking of questions, that was my last one. So does anybody have any questions for Paul? Anything you'd like to ask?
Did he always use the same vehicle?
No. No, I didn't. I used a local realtor down in the valley for a little while who was not necessarily investment property oriented. And then I linked up with another Royal LePage realtor who no longer practices, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I switched to someone that had much more knowledge of investment properties for sure.
Just curious, like, so you're renting to own from the owner, but then you also, like, let's say you have a like duplex, right? And you're renting it out too? Like,
Me personally, I've never done the rent to own. I've done a lot of different strategies
I see
to
you
purchase, but I just buy them and hold. So I figure out a way to buy them somehow. But yeah, like I've done vendor take back, like joint venture, sort of B lenders, hard money, all those sorts of things. They're all available in Halifax. They're all available to you, to anyone, or not to anyone, but to a lot of people. So those options are out there. So those things that you read about, they're real, and you can use them.
He didn't even use the same broker. We went where he had to go to get to the next office.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you do them, the places that you bought, did you do them personally or under a corporation or?
Good question. I initially they were in my name, my name and my wife's name. In fact, most of them still are, to be honest with you. But I do have a number company that I own one of the properties under now. People ask me all the time. One of my cousins called me the other day and said, "Oh, I want to buy. Should I start a company?" And I said, "Well, it depends. Like, there's pros and cons to both of those." I started the company because my partner in the axe throwing business, we decided to purchase some stuff together outside of, the two of us, so we just threw it under a different corporation.
Are you, for your axe stuff, are you leasing those places, or are you actually buying real estate for that as well and then renting it out to your company?
Deadly question. Our one in Halifax, I really wished I owned it because it's worth like $38 million or something. But so definitely not. But it's a great question and really timely because my axe throwing partner and I have had that conversation. The one that we're opening in Fredericton, we ended up leasing, but the owners were a smaller entity. They were just kind of mom and pop landlord, and they were interested in selling, and we were pushing them to buy it. So we wanted to buy it. They ended up, I think our eagerness in buying made them hold on to it, looking back on it now. But so we lease everything that we're in right now, but we definitely have an eye to purchase it. It's like anything, look across the street, well, not necessarily Tim Hortons, but, businesses will come and go, but the building's still there, sort of thing. So that's, eventually we'd like to own some commercial properties too.
Did you self-manage, or was there a point where you switched over to property management?
Yes. So I do actually still manage a couple of them. I have 2 duplexes, and I do manage those. Something I would recommend to people, and I say this to everybody who asks me about real estate, is manage your own properties for a couple of years at least. Because if you just immediately hire a property manager, you actually don't know what you're looking for. I'm a firm believer of figuring it out, going through some of those shitty situations, with tenants, with getting the call at 2 a.m, all those sorts of things, tenancy board hearings, like you should go through that. And then you know what you need in a property manager kind of thing. I have all of mine with the exception of 4 units now under property management, but I did go through and self-manage for a long time.
I'm wondering what your metrics are for figuring out if a property is cash flowing, and what do you do if it's not cash? Your numbers.
Before I buy?
Yeah.
Yeah, so good question. Is Bigger Pockets still like a big thing? Yeah? Okay, so I've had a pro membership on Bigger Pockets, and I use one of their calculators. Like I don't do anything fancy. Like I just put in purchase price, here's the rents, approximate property tax, utilities, and then it just kind of shakes out your number, and I'm like, It's not worth it kind of thing. And, you know, and I tend to try and do somewhere of a minimum of about $100 a door in profit per month. And if I can get to that, I don't own anything in HRM, where that number is probably significantly higher. Outside the city, you know, there's purchase price is much lower, but obviously rents are too. So $100 a door is sort of where I look at. Do I always get it after I purchase them? No. There's periods of time where, you know, where things are bad. The one that I own in the numbered company is down in Digby, and I just went through it. You know, we've all heard that story of the dude in Cole Harbour. You know, and I had one that was similar. Like she worked the system so well. She owes us $9,000. We'll never get it. You know, we won 3 hearings, and we couldn't get her out. It took 9 months. So, and that's going through the process step by step. Unfortunate, but yeah. So back to the metric question: $100 a door, and I just use a bigger pockets calculator.
With the one you had a problem with, did you do a credit check beforehand?
I inherited the tenant.
Okay.
Yeah, I inherited the tenant. She sucked. I don't like her. Yeah.
When you and your wife, were you both on the same mortgages, or did you put like 3 or 4 in your name and 3 or 4 in her name?
No, we put them in jointly, because initially we had to. It was the only way we were going to be approved, is to add our incomes together and that sort of thing. We
If you
weren't.
would have done them separately, would you, to make it easier to get more properties?
Great question. Honestly, I would say no, because of the route I ended up taking with Leanne. I think it was a much better route to sort of get to like the commercial lending side of things where I am now. So I'll kind of spin off topic, but then come back to the topic to answer your question. So I literally had mortgages at I think 7 different banks. It was insanity, like trying to do taxes and all of that. But I finally kind of hit a point where, and Leanne, you know, being the person that she is, she was like, you know, don't come through me anymore. She's like, you've gotten to here. She's like, go to the big banks, talk to their commercial departments. So, you know, we kind of facilitated some meetings, and now I'm a commercial client of RBC. And so it's a completely different set of rules. So I think that if I had been able to, you know, 3 for me, 3 for her, and grow that way, that I don't think I actually would be where I am now, and I'm actually more comfortable where I am now with this big commercial mortgage. Basically what they do is they just hand-picked, you know, 6 properties, and they're together, so I have like a big, you know, yeah, exactly, yeah.
So when you do your cash flow before you buy the property,
Yep.
like how do you figure out the current rent?
How do I figure out the current rent?
Yes.
If it's rented, I'll just use that figure. If it's vacant, I've never bought something. No, that's a lie. Because we did that thing. I live in a more rural area. Rents are it's easy to know. Like, no, I wouldn't say stable, but I would say they're consistent. So if you're from, you know, if you go to Windsor, or you go to Hantsport, or you go to Wolfville's different because it's a university town, but you know, Kentville, New Minas, places like this, Digby, you kind of know what the rents are, and there's a cap. Like you're just not getting $1,400 a month for a 2-bedroom. Doesn't exist outside of Halifax. Like that, that's not a real thing.
Do you like ask somebody if you don't know like what the current rent is, or
Yeah.
go to a website?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, like when I was buying a lot, I would go look at property. I would call or respond to Kijiji ads, and I'd go look at properties. I'd be like, yeah, I want to rent your property. I had no interest, obviously, in renting their property, but I'd walk through and see what $695 got me in the same town that I own a bunch of rentals in. You know, it got weird a couple times because people knew that I was also renting. They knew what I was doing. I was like, this is awkward, but yeah, I'd always find out beforehand, kind of thing. Both. Yeah, both. So I definitely got confident, I guess is probably the right word, where I would buy a property and I knew that, like I bought a property from a guy in Windsor who had owned it for 22 years. He was he'd retired he did not want the property. He gave me a half decent deal on it, but I was willing to pay like a bit higher price because he was about $150 per month lower than he should have been on those. So I knew that one, was going to be able to get spiked up. And then sometimes I buy them and they're already cash flowing for sure. But I don't do it like I've made a couple bad calls for sure, in terms of properties that I've bought, where I thought that I might be able to squeeze out an extra $150 a month, and really that turned into 70 or something. So, that kind of alters your numbers a little bit, but live and learn.
You don't traditionally buy like the do a burr method or
I have.
Okay.
Yeah, I have. Can I mention that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So I didn't want to say. So Jenna and Greg, has Marty ever spoke at one of these?
Yes.
If he has, yeah.
Okay.
Some people have met Marty that does the short-term money lending, arm's length mortgages.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
So Marty Crouse owns a little company called Phoenix Financial, and basically, he'll lend you money for 9 months or 12 months or 15 months, based on what you want to do. So I found this deal in Hansport, just an hour, I guess, away. And it was a super rundown, vacant, 2-unit place, bank foreclosure. So got the money from Marty in cash, and then borrowed an extra, I think we bought it for 42, and then we borrowed 50 from Marty. And the guy who I was doing the deal with, he's handy, so he did a bunch of the work, and then we hired out the electrical and all that good stuff. But before any of that, we had an appraiser go in and say, yeah, this is worth $145,000 if you can get it up to what you say you can get it up to, kind of thing. So I kind of brought in Marty, found the money. The money was Jenna and Greg's, who I didn't know that. And I think we were at
We didn't know each other.
We didn't know each other, and we were at a real estate thing, and I was kind of telling this story, and she's like, I think that's my money you're using. So, I didn't tell her we put in granite countertops and all that. But, that one worked out really well, and then we bird it, got 80% of, I think it came in at like 148, which is exactly where we wanted it to be. And then I actually walked away from the deal, and I just took 50% of, we paid these guys out, paid back Marty and some fees, and then I took 50% and just pocketed like whatever, 14 grand or something.